AITA for refusing to host my cousin's child after she insisted it would be just temporary. I, 33F, have always had a close relationship with my extended family, particularly my cousin Rachel, 31F. Growing up, we spent a lot of time together, and I've always considered her like a sister. I live alone in a modest two-bedroom apartment in a city with a busy job that requires irregular hours. I value my independence and quiet space. And over the years, I've worked hard to maintain stability, both financially and emotionally. About 2 months ago, Rachel called me late one evening, sounding frantic. She explained that she and her husband had just gone through a rough patch, including losing their apartment due to financial trouble, and they couldn't find childcare for their 7-year-old daughter, Emily. She asked if I could watch Emily temporarily, saying that it would only be for a few weeks while they got their affairs in order. Rachel assured me that she and her husband would do everything they could to get back on their feet quickly and that she would cover all expenses. She emphasized repeatedly that it would be temporary and that they really had no other options. At first, I wanted to help. I offered to take Emily for a day or two while they looked for solutions, thinking that short-term support was reasonable. I asked for details about Emily's routine, dietary restrictions, school schedule, and how Rachel envisioned me helping. When she sent over the information, I realized that hosting her full-time would require significant adjustments to my life, including taking time off work, adjusting my apartment, and committing to responsibilities I hadn't signed up for. I started expressing my concerns, explaining that my apartment isn't suited for a long-term stay with a child, that I work long hours, and that my life and schedule are structured in ways that would make hosting Emily for weeks difficult. Rachel dismissed my concerns, saying that I was overthinking things and that she really had no one else to turn to. She stressed that she wouldn't ask if it weren't urgent, and insisted that it would be just a few weeks. She even suggested that I could work from home or rearrange my schedule to accommodate Emily, despite knowing my job is highly structured. I began to feel pressured, and the idea of taking on full-time childcare for a child who isn't mine started to feel overwhelming. I ultimately told her that I couldn't host Emily full-time. I offered alternative solutions. I could watch her for a day or two each week, help find a temporary daycare, contribute to a babysitter's fee, or help research affordable short-term housing options. I also offered to help with groceries and school supplies. I made it clear that I was willing to help in ways that didn't compromise my work, independence, and living situation. Rachel didn't take it well. She became extremely upset and accused me of being selfish and uncaring. She said I was prioritizing my comfort over her child's well-being and suggested that if I truly cared about family, I would step up. She also mentioned that other relatives, who I rarely speak to, had already offered minimal support, implying that I should do more since I had a closer relationship with her. Our other family members got involved when Rachel called them, framing it as me refusing to help in a crisis. Some of them sent messages pressuring me to reconsider, saying that families should always support each other and that Emily's needs were more important than my comfort. I feel conflicted. On one hand, I understand that Rachel is in a difficult situation, and I do care about her and Emily. On the other hand, taking on a full-time child for an indefinite period would drastically impact my life, including my work, social life, and mental health. My apartment isn't set up for a child, and I don't feel equipped to provide full-time care, especially knowing that Rachel might struggle financially and emotionally during this period. I also worry that, if I agreed, it might set a precedent where I'm expected to assume responsibility for her child in future crises. Since refusing, Rachel has been cold toward me, and Emily has noticed the tension, which makes visits awkward. I still help in small ways, like dropping off school supplies and occasionally babysitting for a few hours, but Rachel sees this as insufficient. I also feel guilty because Emily is a sweet child, and it hurts to see her confused and disappointed, even though I know full-time care isn't something I can provide responsibly. Some friends have told me that I was right to set boundaries, and that agreeing to host Emily could have caused significant stress and resentment. Others have suggested that family should always come first, and that I could have made more sacrifices to help in a crisis. I've tried to balance compassion with practicality, but I feel like my actions are being judged unfairly by both Rachel and some family members. So, AITA for refusing to host my cousin's child full-time, even though she insisted it would be temporary, and instead offering support in ways that don't compromise my life and independence. I want to help and maintain my relationship with Rachel and Emily, but I also need to protect my boundaries and mental health. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. AITA for refusing to forgive my husband after he revealed a major secret from his past. I, 33F, have been married to my husband, Ryan, 35M, for 6 years. On the surface, our relationship has been happy and stable. We communicate well, share responsibilities evenly, and enjoy traveling and socializing together. I've always considered Ryan to be trustworthy and open with me, which makes what happened last month so shocking and painful. A few weeks ago, Ryan was unusually quiet one evening. After some prodding, he finally admitted something that left me completely blindsided. Before we met, he had been involved in a serious legal incident that he never disclosed. To summarize, he was arrested for embezzlement while working at a previous job, served a short sentence, and was released. He insisted that he thought it was in the past and that it wouldn't matter to me now. He said he didn't disclose it initially because he was ashamed and feared it would jeopardize our relationship. I was stunned. Ryan has always been open about his life, including past relationships, family issues, and even financial struggles. The fact that he deliberately kept something of this magnitude from me feels like a huge breach of trust. I asked why he hadn't mentioned it when we were dating, or even when we were engaged, and he said he didn't think it was relevant because he had paid his dues and moved on. At first, I tried to process it calmly. I asked him to tell me everything he could remember about the incident, including how much money was involved, whether anyone was hurt, and whether it could impact our current life. He was honest in answering, but the more I learned, the more I felt betrayed. The idea that he spent months, or even years, hiding this from me made me question everything I thought I knew about him. We spent the next few days in tense conversations. Ryan apologized repeatedly and said he understood if I needed space or time. I told him I wasn't sure I could just move past this. I told him trust is fundamental to a marriage, and hiding something of this magnitude feels like a violation. He got defensive at times, insisting that the past is the past, that I've made mistakes I haven't told him about, and that nobody is perfect. I acknowledged that everyone has a past, but I explained that transparency is what matters. Hiding this wasn't a mistake I could forgive easily. It felt intentional. The situation has caused immense tension in our daily life. I've been sleeping poorly, finding it hard to focus at work, and withdrawing from social activities because I can't stop replaying the revelation. Ryan is frustrated that I'm not getting over it, and sometimes he compares our situation to friends who don't make a big deal out of past mistakes. This comparison only makes me feel more isolated because it feels like he doesn't fully understand the emotional impact of hiding this from me. I sought advice from close friends and a therapist. Friends are divided. Some say that Ryan made a mistake but should be forgiven because he was young and changed, while others say that this is a legitimate deal breaker because it shows a pattern of deceit. My therapist emphasized that feeling betrayed is valid and that I am not obligated to forgive simply because he apologizes, but also that holding on to resentment indefinitely could harm both of us if we want to continue the marriage. My parents and siblings have weighed in as well. They're supportive of me, but also encouraging me to consider whether I truly want to continue a relationship where I feel this level of betrayal. Ryan's parents, on the other hand, are urging me to forgive him, saying that he's changed and that I should let the past go. I feel torn because I do love Ryan and appreciate the life we've built together, but I don't know if love alone is enough to overcome the feeling of having been deceived. We haven't formally separated, but our conversations have become increasingly strained. I find myself scrutinizing his every action, and even small miscommunications escalate into arguments about honesty and trust. Ryan has tried to make amends by being extra attentive and open, but it feels performative at times because the issue isn't his effort. It's the fact that he kept such a major secret for so long. I've considered couples therapy, but Ryan seems reluctant to engage seriously, suggesting that talking about the past repeatedly will keep us stuck. I disagree. For me, processing and understanding this secret is essential to rebuilding trust, if that's even possible. I am exhausted from the emotional labor and constantly questioning whether our marriage can survive this. So, AITA for refusing to forgive my husband for hiding a major criminal incident from his past, even though he apologizes and claims it's irrelevant now. AITA for refusing to let my adult son live in my house after he asked for help, even though my family says I'm being selfish. I, 50F, live alone in a 3-bedroom house that I've owned for about 15 years. I work full-time as an accountant, and I spend a lot of time at home focusing on my career, personal projects, and hobbies. My home is my sanctuary, and I like things organized and predictable. I value my independence, and I have always taught my son, Jason, 27M, to be responsible and self-sufficient. Jason has generally been independent, but he has had a rocky few years. He has switched jobs multiple times and struggled with managing finances and long-term planning. He's smart and capable, but he often relies on last-minute solutions instead of planning ahead. I've tried to help him develop better habits, but it's been a slow process. A few weeks ago, Jason lost his job unexpectedly. He called me, stressed and panicked, and told me that he had no savings to fall back on. He asked if he could move into my house temporarily while he looked for work. I listened and offered emotional support. I suggested alternatives like short-term rentals, staying with friends, or programs that provide temporary housing for people in financial need. I also offered to help him search for jobs, update his resume, and prepare for interviews. However, Jason insisted that living with me was the only option that made sense. He said he didn't trust anyone else to manage him responsibly and that my house was a safe place where he could focus on finding a new job. I explained that while I wanted to support him, I couldn't have him living in my house full-time. I told him that my home is my personal space and having another adult living there permanently would be disruptive. I also explained that letting him move in could make him overly dependent on me, which I thought would harm his long-term independence. He became upset and accused me of being selfish. He said that if I truly cared about him, I would prioritize his needs over my comfort. He insisted that this was temporary and that I shouldn't overthink it. I reminded him that temporary can easily turn into months or even years, and that my home and routines would be deeply affected. I offered compromises. He could stay for a few nights a week, I could help pay for a short-term rental, or I could support him in other ways while he maintained his independence. He refused, saying that nothing else would work and that he needed a stable, familiar place to live immediately. Things got worse when my sister, Rachel, 53F, found out about the situation. She called me and said I was being unreasonable. She kept saying that a mother's job is to help her children unconditionally and that I should let Jason stay for a while until he got back on his feet. She also mentioned that family comes first and implied that I was selfish and uncaring for prioritizing my comfort over my son's needs. I tried to explain my reasoning, emphasizing that I wasn't refusing to help him, but that I was drawing a boundary to protect my home and mental health. Rachel was not convinced. Jason is now staying with friends and short-term accommodations, but he continues to complain about how inconvenient and stressful it is. He frequently texts me, expressing frustration and guilt-tripping me by saying that I'm the only parent he trusts and that he feels abandoned. He also hints that our relationship might be damaged if I continue to refuse. My parents and other family members have also chimed in, saying I should give in and let him stay temporarily. I feel torn. I love my son and want to help him succeed, but I also need to protect my space, routines, and mental well-being. I have provided support in numerous ways, helping with job searches, paying for some temporary housing, giving transportation, and offering emotional support. Yet my refusal to have him live with me full-time is being framed as selfishness, and it has caused tension with both Jason and other family members. I have considered whether I'm being too rigid, but I believe that independence is crucial and that letting him move in would enable dependency. I also worry that once I give in, it could set a precedent for future requests and disrupt the balance of my life permanently. At the same time, I feel guilty seeing him struggle and knowing that he views me as the only parent who can help. I want him to succeed, regain stability, and feel supported, but I also have to honor my own boundaries. I'm trying to balance helping him without compromising my home and well-being, but my family sees it differently. AITA for refusing to let my adult son live in my house after he lost his job, even though he says I'm the only parent he trusts and my family thinks I'm being unreasonable. AITA for refusing to let my friend crash at my apartment after she ended a relationship and calling me heartless. I, 29F, have a friend, Maddie, 28F, whom I've known since college. We were extremely close for years, often going on trips together, celebrating birthdays, and leaning on each other during rough times. Over the past few years, our friendship has been mostly positive, but there's always been a slight imbalance in boundaries. Maddie is very impulsive and tends to act first without considering the consequences, while I am more structured and protective of my routines. This has never been a major problem, but a recent incident has caused tension, and now I'm questioning if I handled it wrong. A few weeks ago, Maddie ended a long-term relationship. She was very upset and called me almost immediately, sobbing and saying she didn't know where she was going to stay. Apparently, she and her ex had lived together, and after the breakup, she had nowhere to go. She asked if she could come stay in my apartment temporarily, just until she figured things out. At first, I was sympathetic. I knew breakups can be devastating, and I wanted to be supportive. However, I also knew that letting her move in would be far from simple. My apartment is small, with one bedroom and one bathroom. My schedule is rigid because of my job, and I value my personal space. While I have helped friends in the past in small ways, like hosting them for a few nights or letting them crash when traveling, allowing someone to stay indefinitely during a highly emotional period felt like it could quickly become overwhelming. Maddie's previous stays at friends' places had often been chaotic. She sometimes left things messy, invited other friends over without asking, or relied heavily on others for meals and errands. I tried to approach the situation carefully. I told Maddie that I understood she needed support, but I couldn't have her move in full-time. I suggested other options, staying at a friend's place with more space, renting a short-term sublet, or even finding a local hostel or Airbnb for a few days while she got on her feet. I also offered to help her find housing, provide emotional support, and spend time with her outside my apartment. I made it clear that I wanted to help, but my apartment and schedule couldn't accommodate someone in crisis for an indefinite period. Maddie's reaction was intense. She immediately accused me of being heartless, selfish, and uncaring. She said that I had been her closest friend for years and that I should prioritize her needs over my own comfort. She implied that I didn't understand friendship or loyalty and said that if I truly cared, I would let her stay. She also compared me to other friends who supposedly would have helped without question, making me feel like I was being unfairly judged. I tried to calmly explain my reasoning again. I said that I wanted to be there for her, but that I had to set boundaries for my own mental health and daily functioning. I emphasized that supporting her didn't mean I had to jeopardize my own stability or create an environment that could increase stress for both of us. I also reminded her that I was offering alternative ways to help, including spending time together, helping with housing searches, and being available to talk. Despite this, Maddie became angry and refused to accept any alternative solutions. She accused me of not loving her enough as a friend, of turning my back on her in a time of need, and of being judgmental. She then went on social media and made a post about friends who disappear when you need them the most, which many mutual friends saw. Some of them reached out to me asking why I had been so cruel, while others privately agreed that her expectations were unreasonable given my living situation. Since the incident, Maddie has been distant and cold. She hasn't spoken to me much, and our usual communication has almost completely stopped. Mutual friends are aware of the situation, and some have expressed frustration at both sides, but it's clear that she feels hurt and I feel guilty. I keep replaying the conversation in my head, wondering if I could have handled it differently or if I should have just let her stay for a short while to avoid conflict. I've considered compromises, like letting her stay for a single night while she secured a temporary place, but she wanted to move in immediately and indefinitely, which I wasn't comfortable with. I also worry that even a short stay could set a precedent that might lead to ongoing issues, given her history of extended stays and reliance on friends. I genuinely feel torn. On one hand, I want to be a supportive friend, and I empathize with her emotional state. On the other hand, I know my own boundaries are important for my mental health and living situation. I try to be compassionate while also protecting my space, but it seems Maddie interprets any refusal as a betrayal. Reddit AITA for refusing to let my friend move into my apartment after a breakup and for setting boundaries around my living space. Even though she accused me of being heartless and uncaring, was I unreasonable for prioritizing my own stability while still offering support in other ways? Or should I have done more to accommodate her during a vulnerable time? AITA for refusing to let my brother move back in after he got divorced. Even though he promised it would be temporary, I, 34F, have always been very close to my younger brother, Ethan, 30M. Growing up, we shared a lot, and I've always tried to be there for him when he needed support. I live alone in a one-bedroom apartment in a mid-sized city. My life is structured. I work full-time as a nurse, I have a tight budget, and I enjoy having a stable and quiet environment. My apartment is small, and I've put a lot of effort into making it feel like my sanctuary. About 3 months ago, Ethan called me in tears. He had just finalized his divorce from his wife of 5 years, and he was suddenly without a place to live because the divorce settlement required him to vacate the marital home. He was distraught and asked if he could move in with me just until he got back on his feet. He promised it would be temporary, said he would pay rent, help with groceries, and leave as soon as he could afford his own place. Initially, I felt bad. I didn't want him to be homeless, and I have always tried to support my family. But I hesitated because of my living situation and how disruptive having someone live with me could be, even temporarily. After some thought, I told him I couldn't have him move in. I explained that my apartment is very small, I work long hours, and I value my quiet routine. I also pointed out that cohabiting could put a strain on both of us and our relationship. Ethan got upset. He accused me of being selfish and uncaring, saying that I was his only family nearby and that he had nowhere else to go. He emphasized that he would only stay for a short time and promised again that he would do his part to contribute. I stood firm, reiterating that I wanted to support him, but not by having him live in my small apartment indefinitely. I offered alternatives. I could help him look for a short-term rental, contribute to a deposit for a new apartment, or help him find affordable temporary housing. I even offered to help with groceries or meals while he got settled elsewhere. The reaction was immediate and intense. Ethan stopped speaking to me for a week. Our parents called me repeatedly, saying I was being unreasonable and heartless, and telling me that family should always help each other in times of need. They reminded me that when I was struggling with student loans and job instability, Ethan had been supportive and implied that I owed him the same consideration. I tried to explain that circumstances are different now, and that having someone move in with me is a much bigger responsibility than simply offering emotional support. They continued to pressure me, saying I was damaging our relationship and being cold and unloving. During this time, Ethan reached out to other friends for help and eventually found a temporary sublet, though it's much smaller and more expensive than he wanted. He moved in about 2 weeks ago, and he's been living there since. I haven't spoken to him much, and when we do interact, it's tense. He seems bitter and distant, and I feel a mixture of relief and guilt. Relief because my apartment and daily routine haven't been disrupted, and guilt because my brother is going through a very difficult time and probably expected more support from me. Some friends and coworkers have told me I did the right thing. They say that having a move in could have led to months of tension, arguments, or resentment, especially given the small size of my apartment and the stress he's under. Others have said I should have just made the sacrifice, given that family is supposed to support each other, and that I'm letting pride and comfort take precedence over helping someone in need. I feel caught in the middle. I wanted to support Ethan, but I also needed to maintain boundaries to protect my life and mental health. The situation has strained my relationship with my brother and with our parents. Our parents still occasionally bring it up, suggesting I could have done more. Ethan doesn't acknowledge the help I offered in finding a sublet or helping with moving expenses. I feel frustrated because I try to be helpful in other ways, but none of that seems to matter to him or our parents. I keep asking myself if I should have just let him move in. Maybe it would have helped him feel less alone and strengthened our relationship. On the other hand, I worry that if I had agreed, it could have caused long-term tension and resentment between us or negatively affected my job and personal life. I also worry that my support might have been taken for granted, leaving me in a position where my boundaries are not respected. So, AITA for refusing to let my brother move in after his divorce, even though he promised it would be temporary, and instead offering support in other ways that didn't involve him living in my apartment. I want to help him maintain our relationship, but I also need to protect my home, independence, and mental health. Was I wrong to prioritize boundaries over immediate family needs in this situation? AITA for refusing to let my in-laws stay in our house for an extended period, even though my husband thinks I'm being unreasonable. I, 31F, have been married to my husband, Mark, 34M, for 8 years. We live in a modest 3-bedroom house in a suburban neighborhood. Things have generally been good between us, but recently, a major conflict with my in-laws has put a significant strain on our marriage. Mark's parents, Linda, 60F, and Robert, 62M, have always been very involved in our lives. When we first got married, they lived out of state, so their involvement was mostly through phone calls, visits a few times a year, and advice on everything from furniture to parenting. I've always had a polite relationship with them, but I often felt that they overstepped boundaries, especially when it came to decisions about our home and finances. Mark has always been more accommodating to their suggestions than I am, which has caused tension between us before. The current issue started when they approached us about moving closer to our city. They said they were tired of traveling frequently and that they wanted to be near family because they were planning for retirement. Mark was enthusiastic, thinking it would be great to have his parents nearby. I expressed my concerns right away. Our house is not large enough to comfortably accommodate additional adults for long-term stays. We have 2 young children, ages 5 and 7, and my main priority is their stability and routines. I also value privacy and personal space, and I worry that having my in-laws move in would disrupt that. Mark and I tried to negotiate. I suggested that they rent an apartment or a small house nearby, so we could visit regularly without living together. Mark countered by saying it wouldn't feel the same as having them in our home, and that we should at least consider a trial period to see if it worked. I agreed to consider a short visit for a week or 2, but I explicitly stated that I was not comfortable with a long-term arrangement. Then came a bombshell. Mark told me that his parents had interpreted our conversation as an invitation to stay as long as needed during the house renovations they were planning for their new place. They started dropping hints that they would like to move in for several months. I was furious. I explained that I had never agreed to anything beyond a short visit and that extended stays would be completely impractical for our family. Mark, however, seemed torn. He acknowledged my concerns, but argued that refusing his parents could damage our relationship with them. I tried to set boundaries. I told them directly that our home could accommodate visits, but only for a maximum of 2 weeks at a time. I also mentioned that they would need to respect our routines, privacy, and house rules, including meal times, bedtime for the kids, and shared responsibilities. Linda became defensive, insisting that they were family and should not be treated like guests. She said they wanted to help with the kids, cook meals, and contribute financially, and that I was being ungrateful. Robert echoed her sentiment, saying that families should prioritize togetherness over rules. Mark and I had several heated discussions. I felt like he was prioritizing his parents' feelings over mine, while he argued that I was being inflexible and overly controlling. I tried explaining that my opposition wasn't personal. It was about maintaining a functional household and protecting our children's sense of stability. I also mentioned that our house isn't designed for multiple adults living together long term, and that space constraints would create stress for everyone. Mark acknowledged this, but insisted that refusing them entirely could make his parents resentful. The situation reached a breaking point last weekend. Linda and Robert arrived unexpectedly for what they claimed would be a short visit and ended up staying 3 nights. They criticized our home, our routines, and even small parenting choices. I felt disrespected and powerless, and I had an argument with Mark in front of them. He admitted later that he had hoped I would soften and allow them to stay longer, which made me feel manipulated. I told them I could not continue living like this, and that if they wanted to stay, it had to be under strict time limits and rules, or not at all. Since then, Mark has been distant and frustrated. He keeps saying I need to compromise for family harmony, and I feel like my boundaries are being dismissed. His parents are upset as well, claiming that I am cold and unwelcoming. Some friends have weighed in, saying I should be more flexible and let the in-laws stay if they want to, while others agree that it is reasonable to protect my family's space and routine. I've considered whether I'm overreacting, but I genuinely feel that extended stays would cause ongoing tension, disrupt our children's routines, and invade our privacy. At the same time, I love my husband and his family and don't want this issue to permanently damage relationships. We have not yet finalized a solution, and conversations with Mark are becoming increasingly tense. So, AITA for refusing to let my in-laws stay in our house for an extended period, even though my husband thinks I'm being unreasonable and fears it will damage family relationships. AITA for refusing to let my sister's fiancé move into my house, even though she says it's the only way they can be together. I, 36F, live alone in a 2-story townhouse that I've owned for 7 years. I work from home as a software engineer, so my living space doubles as my workspace. I am very particular about my environment. Everything has its place, and I rely on a quiet, organized home to stay productive and manage my mental health. I also have some expensive equipment and furniture that I've spent years acquiring, so I'm extremely cautious about letting people live with me. My sister, Hannah, 31F, is very close to me. We've always been tight, but she's more spontaneous and tends to make decisions without fully considering the consequences. About a year ago, she started dating a man named Alex, 33M. From the start, I noticed some behaviors in Alex that made me uneasy. He can be controlling, impatient, and somewhat dismissive of other people's boundaries. Hannah, of course, overlooked these traits because she was in love and didn't see them as a problem. 3 months ago, Hannah called me crying, explaining that she and Alex were having issues finding a place to live together. Their current apartment lease was ending unexpectedly, and neither of them had enough savings for a new deposit. She asked if Alex could move into my townhouse temporarily while they figured out a long-term solution. I was caught off guard. I explained that my home is my sanctuary, that I work from home, and that having someone live here full-time would disrupt my life. I also told her that I was uncomfortable with Alex moving in because of the way he interacts with people and my concern for the safety of my property. Hannah begged. She said that Alex was the only person she could trust to take care of herself, and that my house would be a safe, stable place for him. She framed it as if letting Alex stay wasn't just about housing, but about the survival of their relationship. I offered alternatives. I could help them find a short-term rental, contribute toward a deposit, or let Alex stay a few nights per week, but I drew a firm line at him living here permanently. Hannah was furious. She accused me of being selfish, controlling, and unsupportive. She said that if I truly loved her, I would let Alex stay and that I was putting my comfort above her happiness. She kept repeating that this was temporary and that I was overreacting. I tried to explain that temporary can easily stretch into months or even years, and that my routines, mental health, and personal boundaries would be severely affected. She refused to listen. The situation escalated when our parents got involved. They called me repeatedly, saying I was being unreasonable and that families should always help one another. They argued that my townhouse was large enough, that I was overthinking minor inconveniences, and that I was risking my relationship with Hannah over something trivial. I explained that it wasn't about size or inconvenience, but about maintaining my home, my privacy, and my mental well-being. They didn't seem to understand and continued to pressure me. Meanwhile, Alex started contacting me directly, insisting that he would be careful, respect my house rules, and pay for groceries. While I appreciated the politeness, I still did not trust that things would remain under control. Even well-intentioned guests can cause stress and disruption when living full-time, and I've already seen Alex act entitled in other settings. Since I refused, Hannah has been distant and passive-aggressive. She barely talks to me about her life and has made small comments whenever we meet, implying that I am selfish and unsupportive. Alex no longer messages me, but the tension between us is palpable whenever they visit. I have continued to help in every way I can that doesn't involve them living here. I've helped them search for apartments, contributed to deposits, assisted with moving logistics, and offered advice on budgeting and managing their lease. None of this seems to satisfy Hannah. She insists that nothing counts unless Alex is living in my house. I feel torn. On one hand, I love my sister and want her to be happy. On the other hand, I have to protect my home, my routines, and my mental health. I've offered multiple ways to support her that respect my boundaries, yet I am being portrayed as the villain. I worry that if I give in, it will set a precedent that I am willing to sacrifice my space and peace whenever she or someone she cares about faces a problem. I also fear that allowing Alex to move in could permanently damage our relationship if tensions arise from living together. I have asked myself if I'm being too rigid. Maybe letting him stay for a short period would ease their stress and strengthen their relationship. But I also know that my boundaries are important and that compromising them in this way could have long-term negative consequences for my life and for my relationship with my sister. I am trying to find a balance between helping her and maintaining my independence, but my family sees it differently and keeps applying pressure. AITA for refusing to let my sister's fiancé move into my townhouse, even though she claims it's the only way their relationship can survive and my family says I'm being unfair. AITA for refusing to buy expensive gifts for my adult children because my husband thinks I'm being cheap. I, 45F, have two adult children, Alex, 22M, and Sophie, 19F, from a previous marriage. I am now married to my husband, David, 48M, and we have been together for 8 years. David and I have a comfortable life, but we are very careful with our finances because of past experiences, including debt from my first marriage. I try to teach our children a value of money and the importance of budgeting, which sometimes conflicts with my husband's perspective. The issue started around the holidays last year. Both Alex and Sophie came home for Christmas, and naturally, gift giving was discussed. They dropped hints about wanting expensive gifts. Alex wanted the latest high-end gaming console that costs over $600, and Sophie wanted designer shoes that were similarly pricey. I told them that while I loved them and wanted to get them something meaningful, our family had a budget for gifts, and we couldn't spend such large amounts on material items. I suggested alternatives, a thoughtful experience, a smaller gift they had mentioned in passing, or something I could make myself. Alex and Sophie were visibly disappointed and tried to pressure me by saying, "Mom, everyone else gets these things, and it's not a lot for you. You can afford it." I tried to explain that while we do have financial stability, we also need to plan for long-term goals like our mortgage, retirement, and unexpected expenses. I also emphasized that gifts should not be equated with love or generosity. David, however, disagreed with me. He thinks I am being cheap and that spending a little more on the kids would make them happy and show that we care. He said that money is meant to be used to make people you love happy, and that refusing to spend hundreds of dollars on a holiday gift might damage my relationship with the kids. He also accused me of being overly frugal and not understanding the joy that giving expensive gifts can bring. I stood my ground. I refused to buy the high-end gifts, explaining again that I wasn't being cheap. I was being financially responsible. I also pointed out that the kids were old enough to understand that parents have budgets and that they could save and buy these items themselves if they wanted. David called me stubborn and suggested I was ruining Christmas by not spoiling the kids. The argument with David escalated, and we ended up not communicating well for a few days. Meanwhile, Alex and Sophie were upset. They made comments about how their stepdad doesn't understand their needs and how I was unreasonable for not just buying the gifts. This made me feel caught between my husband and my children, both accusing me of being selfish in different ways. I did compromise somewhat by giving them thoughtful gifts within the budget I set, including a few personalized items and experience-based presents like a cooking class for Sophie and a local gaming tournament entry for Alex. Both children were polite, but clearly disappointed. David continued to insist that I should have spent more, arguing that happiness sometimes comes from indulgence, especially with children. Since then, tensions have lingered in the family. David occasionally brings up the issue, saying that I could have made the holidays better for everyone by spending a bit more. My children have started making comments when gifts are discussed, hinting that they feel I don't care enough about their wants. I feel frustrated because I do care, but I also feel that I'm teaching them important lessons about financial responsibility, budgeting, and valuing meaningful gestures over expensive purchases. This is compounded by the fact that Alex is graduating from college soon and will need financial support for moving and rent, while Sophie is still in school. I want to help them in significant ways when it truly matters, but not by spending large sums on material gifts that aren't necessary or realistic. David doesn't seem to understand this distinction, and my kids may be internalizing his view instead of mine, which worries me. I have tried explaining my reasoning calmly, reminding both my children and David that gift giving doesn't equal love and that budgeting responsibly is part of adult life. However, the message seems to be lost in the emotions surrounding the holidays and the immediate desire for expensive items. I also worry that standing firm makes me appear mean or unsupportive, even though my intention is to teach responsible habits and avoid unnecessary financial stress. Reddit AITA for refusing to buy expensive gifts for my adult children because I want to stick to a budget and promote financial responsibility, even though my husband thinks I'm being cheap and my children are disappointed. Am I wrong to prioritize financial stability and meaningful gifts over indulgent spending, or should I have given in to keep everyone happy? Hey friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what can be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. AITA for refusing to let my roommate's boyfriend move in permanently after he was kicked out by his parents. I, 28F, have been living with my best friend and roommate, Hannah, 27F, for about 3 years. Our apartment is a 2-bedroom in a reasonably small city, and we split rent, utilities, and groceries evenly. We have a routine that works well for both of us: quiet evenings, clean shared spaces, and mutual respect for our personal lives. I've always enjoyed living with Hannah, and our friendship has remained strong despite the occasional minor disagreement about chores or noise. Recently, Hannah started dating someone seriously, Liam, 29M. I had met him a few times and thought he seemed nice enough, though admittedly quiet and reserved. A month ago, he called Hannah in tears, saying his parents had kicked him out because of disagreements about his career choice. He told her he had nowhere to go and asked if he could stay with us temporarily until he figured things out. Hannah called me right after and asked if it would be okay for him to move in for just a few weeks. She assured me it would be temporary, that he would pay a small contribution to rent and groceries, and that he wouldn't be a burden. I hesitated. I explained to Hannah that adding another adult to our small apartment would change the dynamics significantly. Our space is limited, and I value my privacy and quiet time after long workdays. I also mentioned that temporary is often a vague term, and situations like this have a way of stretching into months or longer. I offered alternatives. I could help Liam look for a sublet, a short-term rental, or even a hostel if necessary, and I said I was willing to help with small contributions to cover initial costs while he got back on his feet. Hannah insisted, saying I was overreacting and that it would only be a few weeks. She assured me he was really responsible and that I didn't have anything to worry about. After thinking it over, I decided I couldn't agree to let Liam move in. I explained my reasons again, emphasizing that my apartment is small, our routines would be disrupted, and that having him live here could potentially strain my friendship with Hannah. She got upset and accused me of being selfish and unsupportive. She argued that family should help each other in times of need and that I was putting my comfort above someone's well-being. She also said I was letting fear dictate my decisions instead of being compassionate. The situation escalated when Hannah called her parents and ours got involved. My parents were sympathetic to my concerns, but suggested that helping a friend or family member in need is the right thing to do. Hannah's parents were furious with me, saying I was heartless and that I didn't care about her happiness. A few mutual friends also messaged me, asking why I wouldn't let Liam move in, implying that I was being cold and uncaring. I stood firm and offered again to help in other ways, helping Liam search for temporary housing, contributing financially to a security deposit, or providing meals occasionally. Hannah refused all of these alternatives and told me that if I didn't agree, it could hurt our friendship permanently. I tried to explain that my decision wasn't about not caring, but about protecting my personal space and mental health, but she didn't accept it. After a week of back and forth, Liam ended up finding a small studio through a friend's recommendation. It's more expensive than he had hoped and farther from work, but at least it's independent. Hannah and Liam didn't thank me for helping with the search or advice, and since then, Hannah has been distant and cold toward me. She posts cryptic messages on social media about friends who don't support you in hard times, and I can't help but feel that she's referring to me. I feel conflicted. On one hand, I believe I made the responsible choice. Allowing someone to move in temporarily can easily extend indefinitely, and I wasn't willing to compromise my home, routine, and mental health for an uncertain arrangement. On the other hand, I feel guilty because Hannah and Liam were genuinely in a tough situation, and my refusal caused tension and hurt feelings. I've tried to be supportive in other ways, but none of that seems to have mattered. Some friends tell me I was right to set boundaries, and that having Liam move in could have caused resentment and disruption in the long term. Others say I should have made the sacrifice for the sake of my friendship and someone in need. I've thought about what I could have done differently, but I honestly feel that agreeing would have compromised my well-being and perhaps damaged my friendship more if things went poorly. So, AITA for refusing to let my roommate's boyfriend move in after he was kicked out by his parents, even though it was supposed to be temporary, and instead offering support in other ways. I want to maintain my friendship and help where I can, but I also need to protect my home, independence, and peace of mind. Was I wrong to prioritize my boundaries over immediate family-like obligations? AITA for refusing to let my cousin live with me, even though she says she has nowhere else to go. I, 32F, live alone in a 2-bedroom apartment in a mid-sized city. I work full-time in marketing and have a fairly structured routine that includes volunteering, a small circle of friends, and some personal projects I've been developing for years. I consider myself generous and helpful, but I also value my privacy and personal space. Recently, my cousin, Sophie, 28F, asked to move in with me, and it's created serious tension between us and with other family members. Sophie and I have always been close in theory, but not in practice. We grew up together, attended some of the same family events, and share holidays, but our lifestyles are very different. She has a history of being financially irresponsible and has struggled to hold down jobs consistently. She has a tendency to make impulsive decisions and expects family to help her fix things when they inevitably go wrong. I love her, but I know her patterns, and I've always tried to maintain boundaries to avoid enabling behavior. Last month, Sophie called me in tears. She had been evicted from her apartment after falling behind on rent and claimed she had nowhere to go. She said she didn't want to be homeless and that she thought living with me temporarily could solve her problem while she got back on her feet. She sounded desperate, and my initial instinct was to help. I offered to let her stay for a few nights while she figured out a more permanent solution, thinking that a short-term stay was manageable. However, Sophie immediately started negotiating for a longer stay. She said she needed at least a month to get stable, and hinted that she might need to stay even longer if she couldn't find work quickly. I explained that my apartment is small, and I have routines and responsibilities that require personal space. I also mentioned that I work late and sometimes need quiet to focus, and that living together long-term could be stressful for both of us. Sophie got upset and accused me of being selfish, saying that family should help family without hesitation. Over the next few days, I tried to compromise. I suggested she look for short-term sublets, stay with other relatives, or use local shelters while I helped her search and apply for jobs. I also offered to help with transportation, groceries, and resume support. Sophie rejected all of these ideas, insisting that my apartment was the only option and that I was being cruel for not opening my home fully. She started making emotional appeals, saying things like, "If you were really my cousin, you'd help me no matter what," and "I can't believe you'd let me suffer when you can do something." The tension escalated when I realized that Sophie was trying to guilt me by telling other family members I was refusing to help her. She messaged my aunt and uncle, claiming I didn't care about her and was letting her be homeless. I received several calls from family asking why I wouldn't let her stay, and I felt cornered. I explained my reasoning, that my apartment cannot accommodate another adult long-term, that I have work and personal obligations, and that enabling her pattern of instability would ultimately harm her more than help. Some family members understood, but others accused me of being cold and unkind. Sophie didn't take no for an answer. She showed up at my apartment one weekend, saying she needed a place to sleep immediately. I told her firmly that she could not stay and that I had provided resources for temporary housing. She became angry and threatened to call the police or social services, claiming I was abandoning her. I stayed calm and reiterated my boundaries, but the situation was incredibly stressful. Mark, my boyfriend of 5 years, has supported my decision, emphasizing that it's important to maintain boundaries and that Sophie's issues are long-standing and complicated. He pointed out that allowing her to move in could create long-term tension and disrupt our relationship, as well as my professional and personal life. He also suggested that we continue helping her in other ways that don't involve giving up our space. Despite this, Sophie and some family members continued to pressure me. I've been called selfish, cruel, and uncaring. I feel guilty because I do care about her and don't want her to be in a desperate situation, but I also feel like my own life and stability are at stake. I'm exhausted from the emotional labor of dealing with her, Mark, and other family members simultaneously. I've considered whether I could compromise further, perhaps by setting a strict 2-week limit or providing more financial assistance. But I worry that any arrangement would lead to conflict and ultimately be unsustainable. I've already offered temporary help, guidance, and support outside of my home, which seems reasonable to me. Sophie, however, insists that family support should mean giving her a place to live, and she views my refusal as a personal betrayal. So, AITA for refusing to let my cousin live with me, even though she claims she has nowhere else to go, and some family members think I should prioritize her immediate needs over my own boundaries and stability. AITA for refusing to let my brother live in my house after he lost his job, even though my family says I'm being selfish. I, 45F, own a 3-bedroom house in a suburban area where I've lived for over 10 years. I work from home as a freelance editor, and my house is not just a place to live, it's also my workspace. I've spent years organizing it to suit my lifestyle with a dedicated office, a quiet reading corner, and a small studio for hobbies. I value my personal space highly, and I like things predictable and peaceful because my work can be stressful and demanding. My brother, Ryan, 33M, and I have always been close, but he has struggled with long-term stability. He switches jobs frequently, has a history of financial mismanagement, and sometimes depends on my parents and me for support during tough times. I've tried to guide him toward independence, but it's been a slow and sometimes frustrating process. 2 weeks ago, Ryan lost his job unexpectedly. He called me, stressed and panicked, explaining that he had no savings, nowhere to stay, and no immediate job prospects. He asked if he could move into my house while he looked for work. I listened and offered emotional support, but I said no to him moving in full-time. I explained that my home is my sanctuary, that my work requires a quiet environment, and that I was not comfortable having him live here indefinitely. I also explained that I wanted him to maintain his independence and that moving back and could encourage dependency rather than responsibility. Ryan became upset, saying I was being selfish and that I was the only family member he trusted to help him. He argued that other friends and relatives wouldn't be reliable, and that living with me temporarily was the only solution that made sense. I offered alternatives. I could help him find a short-term rental, contribute toward a deposit, or let him stay a few nights per week while he got back on his feet. I also offered to help him update his resume, apply for jobs, and prepare for interviews. He refused all of these solutions, insisting that he needed full-time access to my home immediately. The situation escalated when our parents got involved. They called and said I was being unreasonable and unkind. They insisted that families should always help one another, especially in times of crisis, and that I was prioritizing my comfort over my brother's well-being. I explained that I was not refusing to help him. I was offering multiple ways to assist that did not involve him living full-time in my house, but they seemed to dismiss my perspective. Ryan is now staying with friends and short-term rentals, but he continues to express frustration. He texts me frequently, saying that I'm the only parent he trusts, that he feels abandoned, and that our relationship is suffering because of my refusal. He also hints that I am damaging his chances of finding stability by not letting him live with me. I feel conflicted. I love my brother and want him to succeed, but I also need to protect my home, my routines, and my mental health. Allowing him to move in would disrupt my work and personal life, create stress, and possibly lead to long-term tension if conflict arise. I also worry that letting him stay could set a precedent, making him expect support in the same way in the future, which could undermine his independence. I've tried to support him in ways that respect my boundaries. I've helped pay for temporary housing, assisted with moving logistics, provided guidance for job applications, and offered emotional support. Despite this, my family frames me as selfish for not letting him live in my house. They argue that I'm making him suffer unnecessarily, but I feel that I am balancing compassion with maintaining necessary boundaries. I considered whether I am being too rigid. Perhaps letting him stay for a few weeks would relieve his immediate stress. But I also know that my home is my refuge, and compromising it in this way could have long-lasting consequences for both my life and our relationship. I'm trying to be supportive without sacrificing my independence, but my family sees it differently and continues to pressure me. AITA for refusing to let my adult brother move in after losing his job, even though he says I'm the only family member he trusts and my family thinks I'm being unreasonable. AITA for refusing to host my brother's birthday party at my house after he accused me of favoring my friends. I, 38F, have a younger brother, Ryan, 35M, and our relationship has always been a mix of close moments and tension. Growing up, we were friendly but competitive, and as adults, our differences have sometimes caused friction. Ryan is very extroverted and spontaneous, while I am more introverted and prefer controlled environments. I also host a lot of social gatherings with my friends, which Ryan sometimes attends, and he has occasionally made remarks about me spending more time with my friends than with family. This situation began when Ryan asked me if I could host his birthday party at my house. He said he wanted a big gathering, inviting a large number of friends, extended family, and even some coworkers he's close with. He expected it to be a weekend-long event with a barbecue, music, and outdoor games. My house is comfortable for small groups, but it is not set up to accommodate more than about 20 people at once, and his guest list would have easily exceeded 40. I explained this to him, mentioning that I didn't think my house could safely or comfortably host such a large event. I also told him that hosting such a big party would be extremely stressful for me and my partner, as we both have demanding jobs and limited time for preparation and cleanup. I suggested a few alternatives: renting a local community hall, hosting a smaller dinner at my place, or even planning a party at a restaurant or park where large groups are easier to accommodate. Ryan did not take this well. He accused me of being selfish and said that I always prioritize my friends over family. He brought up past events where I hosted get-togethers for my friends, claiming I spent more money, effort, and energy on them than I ever do for him. He said it was unfair that I wouldn't do something similar for his birthday, and that it made him feel less important than my social circle. I tried to explain that my friends' gatherings were smaller and within my capacity to host comfortably, and that I was not refusing to help celebrate his birthday at all. I just wanted to do it in a way that was manageable for my household. I reiterated that renting a hall or having the party elsewhere would allow for everyone he wanted to invite while keeping things safe and less stressful. He dismissed these suggestions and continued to insist that my home was where the party should be, framing my refusal as me putting my comfort over family. When I refused to host, Ryan became angry and resentful. He stopped communicating for a few days and then sent a long message criticizing me for being cold and uncaring, saying he couldn't believe I would deny him a celebration in his own family. He also implied that our parents would agree with him, claiming that I always make excuses when it comes to family events. I tried to involve our parents to mediate, but they were neutral. They understood my reasoning about space and stress, but also empathized with Ryan's disappointment. The situation became more complicated because our mutual friends were aware of the argument. Some of them sided with Ryan, saying I could have made it work if I tried harder. Others agreed that my refusal was reasonable, given the logistical and personal stress involved in hosting such a large group. I felt caught between wanting to maintain my household's boundaries and wanting to support my brother, who genuinely felt hurt. I had to try to find a compromise. I offered to help him organize a smaller celebration at my house on a different day, or to assist with coordinating a larger venue. I also offered to cook for a limited group of family members and close friends to make the day special. But he rejected these suggestions, insisting that the main event had to be at my house with everyone he invited. Since then, our relationship has cooled. Ryan is distant and occasionally makes passive-aggressive comments about my social life, implying that I care more about my friends and my family. I feel guilty because I genuinely wanted to celebrate his birthday and support him, but I also feel justified in protecting my home, my time, and my mental energy. Hosting a party of that size in my space would have been overwhelming and potentially unsafe. Reddit AITA for refusing to host my brother's birthday party at my house because the guest list and event scale would be unmanageable, even though he accused me of favoring my friends over family. Was I unreasonable to prioritize my household's limits and personal stress over his expectations for a big celebration? AITA for refusing to let my sister stay with me after she lost her apartment, even though she promised it would be temporary. I, 32F, live in a 2-bedroom apartment in a mid-sized city with my partner, 34M, and our dog. Our lives are pretty structured. We both work full-time, split chores, and have a routine that keeps our household running smoothly. My younger sister, Claire, 28F, has always had a more chaotic lifestyle. She's intelligent and funny, but she struggles with stability. She's had a series of short-term jobs, often spends impulsively, and has relied on friends and family during difficult times. A few weeks ago, Claire called me in tears. She had lost her job at a retail store, fallen behind on rent, and been evicted from her apartment. She explained that she had no place to go and asked if she could stay with me temporarily until she could get back on her feet. She assured me it would only be for a few weeks and that she would pay rent, help with chores, and leave once she had a new place. I felt bad for her. I wanted to help, but my apartment is not very big, and I value my privacy and the routines I've established with my partner. After thinking it over, I told her that I couldn't have her move in. I explained that our apartment is small, that our dog is anxious around strangers, and that having her live with us could create tension and disrupt our household. I also mentioned that I wanted to support her in ways that wouldn't compromise my home life. I offered alternatives, helping her search for a short-term rental or sublet, giving her a small amount of money to cover a deposit, or helping her with groceries or transportation while she found somewhere else to live. I also offered to spend time with her socially, like taking her out for meals or movies, to support her emotionally during this stressful period. Claire didn't take it well. She got very upset, saying I was heartless and that families should always help each other. She accused me of putting my comfort above her well-being and insisted that I was abandoning her. She claimed that I had no right to refuse her when she had nowhere else to go, and that I was being selfish for prioritizing my lifestyle over helping my own sister. Our parents also got involved after she called them, telling me I should let her move in and that I was making her situation worse. They reminded me that when I had gone through tough times in the past, Claire had helped me emotionally and that I owed her the same consideration now. I tried to explain that I valued my relationship with Claire and that I wanted to help, but I also needed to maintain boundaries to prevent potential conflicts. I was concerned that having her live with us could easily extend beyond a few weeks, that she might not contribute consistently, and that the arrangement could lead to arguments or resentment. I emphasized that my refusal was not about her as a person, but about preserving a healthy, living environment and maintaining my mental well-being. Claire eventually found a small sublet on her own. It's more expensive than she wanted, and it's a bit far from work, but at least she has a place to stay. I haven't brought up the argument since then, but she is clearly upset with me. She avoids talking to me directly, and when we interact, it's strained. Some mutual friends have commented on social media about my coldness, suggesting that I should have done more to help. Others have privately told me that I made the right choice, saying that having Claire move and could have caused long-term tension and disrupted my home life. I feel conflicted. I believe I made a responsible decision that balanced compassion with my own boundaries. I offered support in other ways that didn't compromise my household, but it didn't seem to matter to Claire or some family members. At the same time, I feel guilty seeing her struggle, and I worry that my refusal damaged our relationship. I wonder if I could have handled it differently, perhaps by setting clear rules and a strict timeline for her stay, but I'm also concerned that even a temporary arrangement could have led to ongoing stress and resentment. My partner fully supports my decision, saying that our home life and personal space are important and that it's reasonable to help family in ways that don't jeopardize your own stability. Still, the tension with Claire and our parents has made me question whether I was too rigid. I want to maintain a good relationship with my sister, but I also don't want to compromise my home and mental health. So, AITA for refusing to let my sister stay with me after she lost her apartment, even though she promised it would be temporary, and instead offering support in other ways that didn't disrupt my household. I want to help her and keep our relationship intact, but I also need to protect my living space, routine, and well-being. Was I wrong to prioritize boundaries over immediate family needs in this situation? AITA for refusing to co-sign a loan for my brother, even though he says it's urgent? I, 35F, have a younger brother, Jason, 31M, and we've always had a complicated relationship. Growing up, he was more rebellious and impulsive, while I was cautious and responsible. Despite our differences, I've always tried to support him, both emotionally and financially when I could, though I'm careful not to enable bad decisions. A few months ago, Jason told me he needed a loan to cover some unexpected expenses. At first, I assumed it was something like medical bills or a car repair, so I listened. He explained that he wanted to buy a small investment property, a 2-bedroom house near the city, and that he needed a co-signer because his credit history isn't great. He said the bank requires a co-signer because of some past missed payments, and he insisted that it was urgent because the property would otherwise be sold. I was immediately hesitant. I make a good living, but I also have my own mortgage, savings goals, and retirement plans. Co-signing a loan isn't a minor favor. It's a serious legal and financial commitment. If Jason fails to make payments, the bank would come after me. I explained this to him, telling him that I wasn't comfortable risking my financial stability. I also mentioned that I've seen him make impulsive financial decisions in the past, including taking out high-interest loans and not paying bills on time. Jason got frustrated. He accused me of being selfish and unsupportive, saying that family should help each other in situations like this. He argued that co-signing wouldn't cost me anything directly as long as he paid on time and that I should trust him. I tried to remain calm and reiterated that co-signing a loan is a legal obligation and that I could not afford the risk, even if he promised to pay. I suggested alternatives, like him finding a partner, using a smaller loan, or saving longer for down payment. He dismissed these ideas, saying they would take too long and that the property opportunity was a once-in-a-lifetime chance. The tension escalated when he started pressuring me emotionally. He said things like, I can't believe you won't help me after everything I've done for you. And if you loved me, you would trust me with this. I tried to explain that my refusal isn't about love or trust. It's about financial responsibility and risk. He countered that I was making him choose between family loyalty and opportunity, which made me feel guilty and conflicted. I reached out to a financial advisor to better understand the implications. They confirmed my concerns. Co-signing a loan for property I don't own could impact my credit score, my ability to get future loans, and even my taxes. It's also legally binding, meaning I would be fully responsible if Jason defaults. I felt validated in my decision, but also anxious about the emotional fallout with my brother. Jason didn't take no for an answer. He began contacting other family members, saying I was refusing to help and painting me as unsupportive and greedy. This has caused strain with our parents and other siblings, some of whom have encouraged me to reconsider. A few even suggested that I could set rules for co-signing, like making him provide proof of income or monthly statements. I explained that even with rules, I'm legally responsible, so it doesn't change the risk. Since our arguments began, Jason has been distant and passive-aggressive. He stops by unannounced, texts constantly, and occasionally makes veiled remarks in family gatherings about my unwillingness to help him. Our parents have tried to mediate, but they acknowledge my concerns and don't want to force me into a financial decision I'm uncomfortable with. I've offered emotional support and practical advice, like helping him improve his credit or explore smaller loans, but he insists that nothing else will work. I feel stuck. On one hand, I want to help my brother succeed and not have our relationship damaged by this conflict. On the other hand, co-signing a loan feels reckless and could jeopardize my financial security for years. I've explained this repeatedly, but Jason interprets it as a lack of support or even betrayal. I'm also worried about the long-term impact on our relationship and the ongoing family tension. I've considered compromising by helping in other ways, like contributing a small portion of the down payment or helping him budget, but he insists that these measures won't be enough. I feel like I'm being cornered into a decision I can't afford to make, and it's causing constant stress and anxiety. So, AITA for refusing to co-sign a loan for my brother, even though he says it's urgent and that I'm the only person he can rely on, while some family members think I'm being unsupportive or selfish. AITA for refusing to let my sister's boyfriend move into my house, even though she says it's the only way they can stay together. I, 35F, live alone in a 3-bedroom townhouse that I purchased about 6 years ago. I work remotely as a marketing manager, so my home doubles as my workspace. I have a very structured daily routine, and my house is organized in a way that allows me to balance work, hobbies, and downtime. Over the years, I've accumulated some expensive furniture and electronics, so I am extremely careful about who I let into my home. My sister, Laura, 30F, and I have always been close. She is outgoing and spontaneous, while I tend to be more methodical and cautious. About a year ago, she started dating a man named Tyler, 32M. I met him a few times, and while he seemed polite, I noticed that he could be very controlling and has a tendency to dismiss other people's boundaries. Laura has always been very protective of him and brushes off any concerns I raise. A few months ago, Laura called me in tears. She explained that she and Tyler were having trouble finding a place to live together because Tyler's lease ended unexpectedly, and they didn't have enough money for a deposit on a new apartment. She asked if Tyler could move into my townhouse temporarily while they sorted things out. I was caught off guard. I told her I wasn't comfortable having him live here full-time. I explained that my house is my sanctuary, that my routines depend on a quiet and organized environment, and that I couldn't risk damage to my property or disruption to my workflow. I also told her that I didn't feel comfortable having someone in my home long-term who I barely know and who I've already noticed can push boundaries. Laura begged. She said it would only be temporary, that would help their relationship, and that I was the only family member she trusted to provide a stable environment. She framed it as if letting Tyler stay wasn't just about housing, but about the survival of their relationship. I offered compromises. Tyler could stay a few nights per week. I could help them find a short-term rental, or I could contribute financially to help cover a deposit. I drew a firm line at him living in my house full-time. Laura became upset. She accused me of being selfish and controlling. She said that if I loved her, I would support her and Tyler, and that I was putting my comfort above her happiness. She kept insisting that my house was the only safe place for him, and that anything less would put their relationship at risk. I tried to explain that this was not personal and that I wanted to help in ways that didn't disrupt my life, but she refused to accept that. The situation escalated when our parents got involved. They called me multiple times, saying I was being unreasonable and that families should always help each other. They argued that my townhouse was spacious enough and that I was overthinking minor inconveniences. They implied that my refusal could permanently damage my relationship with Laura. I told them repeatedly that it wasn't about space or inconvenience. It was about maintaining my personal boundaries, mental health, and the integrity of my home. They seemed unconvinced and kept pressuring me to change my mind. Meanwhile, Tyler started messaging me directly, insisting he would respect my house rules, pay for groceries, and not disrupt my routines. While I appreciated the courtesy, I still didn't trust that a full-time arrangement would work. I've seen him disregard small boundaries in social situations, and I knew that living here could create conflict. Since I refused, Laura has become distant and passive-aggressive. She barely talks to me about anything other than her frustration with me. She makes occasional comments implying that I'm selfish and unsupportive. Tyler no longer contacts me, but the tension is palpable whenever they visit or I see them at family events. I continue to help in ways that don't involve him living here, assisting with apartment searches, helping with deposits, offering advice on budgeting, and providing emotional support. Laura says these measures aren't enough unless Tyler moves in, and that nothing else counts. I feel conflicted. I love my sister and want her to be happy, but I also have to protect my home, routines, and mental health. Letting Tyler move in would disrupt my work, create stress, and potentially damage my relationship with both of them if tensions arise. I also worry that giving in would set a precedent, making it difficult to enforce boundaries in the future. I've asked myself whether I'm being too rigid. Maybe letting him stay for a short period would relieve their immediate stress and strengthen their relationship. But I also know that my home is my sanctuary, and compromising it in this way could have long-lasting negative effect for both my life and our relationship. I'm trying to balance supporting Laura with maintaining my independence, but my family continues to pressure me and frame me as the villain. AITA for refusing to let my sister's boyfriend move in my townhouse, even though she says it's the only way their relationship can survive and my family says I'm being unfair. AITA for refusing to let my sister move back in after she threatened to leave her kids with me. I, 37F, have a younger sister, Claire, 34F, who has always struggled with stability, financially, emotionally, and in her relationships. She has 2 children, ages 5 and 7, and I have always been very involved in their lives, helping with school runs, babysitting occasionally, and supporting her through tough times. I love my nieces dearly, but I also have a full-time job, a household to run, and a family life that I need to protect. A few weeks ago, Claire called me in tears. She had just ended her 3rd serious relationship in the past 2 years, and her living situation had become unstable. Her landlord had given her notice, and she had no immediate place to go. She asked if she could move in with me temporarily until she figured things out. I was immediately concerned. Claire has stayed with me before during rough patches, and each time it ended up being chaotic. She often ignored house rules, disrupted my schedule, and relied heavily on me financially. I wanted to help, but I also needed to consider my household and my own mental health. I explained to her that I couldn't take her in again for an indefinite period, but I offered to help in other ways, helping her find a short-term rental, contributing to a temporary Airbnb stay, or assisting with childcare during work hours so she could handle logistics. Claire reacted badly. She accused me of being selfish and cold, saying that families should always support each other no matter the circumstances. She implied that if I truly cared about my nieces, I would make space for her and them in my home. I reminded her that helping doesn't always mean giving up everything, and that temporary solutions outside my house were safer and more practical for everyone involved. Things escalated when Claire said she didn't know what she would do with the kids if I refused. She suggested she might have to leave them with me while she figured out her housing situation. I felt blindsided and angry. I told her that I could not and would not let her drop off her children without a plan. This is not a daycare, and I'm not her only option. She became upset and said that my refusal was proof that I didn't love her or the kids enough to be supportive. I stuck to my decision, insisting that my boundaries were reasonable and necessary. I also contacted our parents to update them on the situation. They were concerned, but understood my position after hearing the full story. They even suggested helping Claire find temporary housing so that everyone's needs were balanced. Claire, however, felt betrayed that I involved our parents, claiming that I was turning them against her. Since then, communication with Claire has been tense. She occasionally texts about the kids in a passive-aggressive tone, making comments about how family doesn't help anymore or how I always put my comfort first. I feel guilty because I genuinely care about her and my nieces, but I also feel justified in enforcing boundaries that protect my household and mental health. I offered to help financially for temporary housing and to babysit occasionally, but she rejected these options, insisting that she wanted to live with me full-time. I also tried proposing a compromise. She could move in for a short, fixed period with strict rules, including paying a share of rent and responsibilities around the house. Claire immediately refused and said that my conditions were unreasonable and controlling. I felt stuck. She is asking for help, but not in a way that is safe, fair, or manageable. I've spoken with a few mutual friends, and they're divided. Some say I should have let her move in temporarily to avoid conflict and to help the kids. Others say my decision was sensible, as repeated stays with her have proven chaotic and unsustainable. I'm torn between wanting to support my sister and her children and maintaining boundaries that protect my life and my home. Reddit AITA for refusing to let my sister move back into my house after she threatened to leave her kids with me, insisting that family should always accommodate her, even when it's disruptive and unhealthy. Was I wrong to prioritize my household, mental health, and my niece's stability over her immediate crisis? Or was my response reasonable given the circumstances? Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos also. Leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.